Hello, welcome to Neoliberal Centrist Dad, and this week's episode is highly controversial because I have with me a highly controversial guest who will shock and amaze my listeners. No, he's a very nice guy, and I'm very glad he's joined me, and I'm very happy for him to be here. But his name is Gawain Towler, and instead of me trying to approximate his bio, what I will do is I will allow him to tell you who he is.
Right, well, hello, I'm Gawain Towler, and I have been, for the last 20-odd years, I was working in and around what I call the tribe, which are parties led by Nigel Farage over a period of 20 years, from 2004 until October, I think, last year. So that'll be UKIP in its, I don't know if the right term is glory days, but less gory days, up until just after the European referendum and then the Brexit Party until it self-immolated on the bedrock of a 2019 general election, and now the Reform Party that seems to be doing its thing.
Wonderful. So you were in and around basically the Farage sort of ecosphere, UKIP, Brexit Party, Reform for 20 years.
Yeah.
In various functions.
In various forms, yeah.
In various forms. Okay, so what I want to cover here is three basic questions which are all intertwined, which is can Reform overtake the Tories as the main centre-right party in Britain? And if so, if that's the case, can Nigel Farage become the next Prime Minister or Prime Minister at some point? And finally, if that were to happen, what would need to happen overall, so internally and externally to the Reform Party?
Okay.
Big question.
Is that all at once?
That's that's all at once.
Okay. 1, yes. 2, yes. 3, don't know entirely.
And that's our podcast. Thank you. That was great, Tyler.
Can Reform replace the Tories as the party of the centre-right, the generic party of the general party of the centre-right? Absolutely. Right now, it's very clear that Labour are expending a lot of their ammunition on Reform. I think one of the funniest I've seen in recent months is the Labour candidate for Runcorn producing a petition to block an asylum hostel in Runcorn. This is the same.
Yes.
This is the same woman who used to be celebrating the asylum hospitals in Runcorn, which is rather glorious.
That was fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
It's sort of straight out there with British jobs for British workers from Gordon Brown. And they're learning Lib Dem tactics, I think. What do the people want us to hear? They want us to hear that, so we'll be that for them.
That's true.
That sort of... So, that I think is very funny. But in terms of the question, we are an electoral threat to Labour. We are an existential threat to the Tories. Last night, the results have actually just come through. Central Glasgow by-election ward. The SNP won. Labour came second, and Reform came third on 23% in a Glasgow ward.
Yeah.
The Tories were on about 4%.
Right.
Lib Dems were nowhere. Greens were nowhere. This is an existential threat. Right. And that's Glasgow. And this sort of result has been replicated in large parts of the country. I think you'll see, in May, obviously, it's going to be the first big electoral test of the new Reform. Essentially, the Reform Party in the general election was held together by 14 yards of string and a pot of sealing wax.
Yeah. James Murdoch being almost the classic example.
But an awful lot of hard work and self-belief and effort from our volunteers. We sometimes forget parties aren't just their structure. They are the individuals within that structure and the people who do the work. So
on that, so one of the things that if I look at things, externally, this is external and internal, that might be difficult for Reform to overcome. One of the things I always think about is not quite having the ground game that the others have. Simply by dint of time spent, how long they've been around, it's difficult to build these things organically.
You were right, but I would suggest if you look at the decimation of the membership of particularly the Tory party, it's hollowed out.
Yes,
its membership base is elderly, I suspect of their approximately 100,000 members, give or take, a good 2/3 are people who forgot that they've got a rolling subscription, and don't even realise, can't even remember they were Tory members. They are that active.
Right.
If you look at the branches, the number of people who are young and active, or even old and active, it is risible. Think of the Tories having a ground game; they've got an underground game.
Yeah.
I think 6 foot underground at this point. Whereas Reform have got all these terrifyingly enthusiastic people who've only just joined this year.
Yes,
and people who've just joined this year, all 150, 60,000 of them, or more, I think, new since July. These are people who are raring to go. At the end of next week, on Friday, we're having a rally in Birmingham to launch those campaigns, to launch the council election campaigns and the mayoral campaigns in Doncaster, in Hull, in the west of England, in Lincolnshire and various elsewhere. I think they've sold 10,000 tickets.
It's going to be. It sounds like it's going to be,
including one to me.
Yeah, no, it sounds like.
It is astonishing the enthusiasm. Now, we are aware there's some little local difficulties as you build structures. Noses get put out of joint. Wrong steps are made. These things happen. If we think of politics as warfare by other means, there are casualties, and sometimes there's blue on blue.
Yeah,
it does happen, and one wishes it didn't.
Yeah,
but it does. But I think the general trajectory is there. I think there is now what psephologists call a base of people who are going to vote Reform, come what may.
I mean,
other parties have them. We seem to have created a base in a remarkably short period of time. But this is what I mean about the tribe. If you go to South Wales and look at what's happening in South Wales for next year, or White Wales across the board, UKIP were winning seats in the Welsh in the European parliamentary elections years ago, decades ago. There have been people who have voted for the tribe in South Wales. They won seats in the Welsh Assembly 2 terms ago. Since 8, 9. People seem to think each election is a completely new electoral cycle. It isn't for the other parties.
Yeah.
And you almost suggested it. We don't have that base, but actually,
that history. Yeah.
But actually, we do.
Well, that's I can see what you're saying.
We do. We've had people voting for us in parts of the country for a long period of time. When I go around the country doing speaker meetings to branches, and I went to Wrexham, for example, last Saturday. And there was about 130 in the room, which was flattering, on a Saturday morning as well, which is extraordinary. But there were people I recognised from 15 years ago. Not many, but there are people. So when you get all these new, enthusiastic people who have been chucking stuff at the radio and their spouses have said, stop it, go and do something about it, they are meeting up with people who have actually done it before.
Yeah.
And so when teams go out door knocking, there's almost always somebody who's an old hand.
Yeah.
And so I think what you suggest is a position held, certainly by the Tory party, and probably by Labour, though less so by Labour. I think they're aware of the dangers. But there is complacency. And Kemi's attitude is, we can ignore them, they'll blow up. Well... good luck with that one, Kemi.
I mean, it will be interesting to see what happens in Birmingham, a week and a day, 28?
Yeah.
That will be really interesting to watch, particularly given I felt that the Tories' local election launch, call it low-key would be putting it mildly.
Has it happened?
It's happened. Yeah. Do you know what their slogan is?
Oh, it was about they had a slogan that we nicked their URL.
I'll explain it to you. This is literally it. Lower taxes, better public services. From
a party that has governed us with the highest taxes post-war and the worst public services that anybody can remember.
I mean, beyond anything else, it's like something ChatGPT put up. Actually, but I think ChatGPT would have come up with something better. Actually,
Grok would have done.
Well, true. It's like they've given up, which is very strange to me. When you think about what's happening with the polls, when you think about what's happening, the thing that's really struck me since the general election is the complacency of the Conservative Party. It constantly slaps me in the face. I keep thinking, well, this will wake them up, and nothing ever does.
I don't think it's complacency.
Okay, what do you think it is?
They're dead. There isn't a pulse there.
Right.
I think complacency suggests that they're just slightly baffled.
Yeah.
I think in many parts of the country there's literally no pulse at all.
Right.
And head office is being told off for being. I think the sort of the message that went out to Tory head office from
Kemi. What is it?
Slap.
Just to inform the listeners, so basically, Kemi, or it had been put in her voice anyway, basically been saying, "Oh, you're all lazy or something. You're not doing your jobs. What the hell's happening?" This is at a time when there's been massive layoffs at CCHQ, and everybody's trying to do like 2 jobs at once, and like the idea of inspiring them is, "Hey, you're all lazy. What the hell are you doing?"
I think the membership department. You know that great warehouse at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yes.
I suspect the membership department's like that, but all the boxes are empty.
Very much. Well, yeah, I think you're probably right. So one issue for reform that keeps coming at me, so with the Rupert Lowe stuff, which we don't need to go over in detail because it's been covered so heavily elsewhere, but the thing that interests me about it is, to me, it really felt like, so many people wanted to put it into personality politics, this whole idea that Nigel Farage always falls out with people, blah, 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 blah. Never mind the fact that actually what was interesting is, if you look at everybody he's fallen out with, they've all sort of fallen by the wayside, and he's obviously leading, the party that's ahead in the polls. That's just a fact. Whatever you feel about, whatever your thoughts about Nigel Farage. But the interesting thing to me was it feels like, and this, I felt like it was always going to come to a head, and now it has quite early.
Yeah.
And that actually could possibly benefit
good thing.
Reform, which is, it's in essence, it's this kind of idea of, well, what does Farage want to do? Does he basically want to sort of take over the centre-right overall?
Mm-hmm.
Or does he want to just try and appeal to the Tommy Robinson supporters, to put it in shorthand? And it felt like with what he was doing with Rupert Lowe was kind of, it was a laying down of that. And particularly we've seen that since with, he's come out and said so many attacks on Zai Youssef are racist, which frankly they are.
Actually, looking at the timelines, there's some pretty vile stuff out there. But I'd like to point out that very little of that vile stuff, very little at all, is from Reform people.
Right.
It really is. It's the shouting, screaming in the last few weeks about Rupert it's basically people out with Reform Party trying to pull the Reform Party to the right.
Yeah.
And these are the people who have a go at Zia's faith and things of this sort. So Rupert was showing quite a lot of leg to that crowd.
He certainly was.
And they saw him as a champion. But again, I told you, I've been around. I've probably seen more ordinary members face to face in the last few weeks than most people in the party, because I've been doing these public meetings all over the place. And I would say 2 to 5% are really, really upset.
Just about roughly on Lowe's side, or would you say
on Lowe's side-ish?
Yeah,
2 to 5%.
Yeah.
Now, there are other attitudes of disquiet. And when you build the system so fast, sometimes the sinews don't attach, and there are communication issues between the party at the bottom level and top level. But this is hardly a surprise. It is. One wishes everything popped out perfect. Always,
right? But
it doesn't, because no straight thing was ever made, and it is very, very difficult. There are many criticisms of the chairman, but I don't think one can criticise the sheer work rate and the creation of structures at such a speed. And sometimes there are problems around the edges. It happens, and it's perfection is not something that we will ever have in a human life.
Do you think Farage is going to stick by Youssef?
For now, he's given him a job.
Right. Yeah.
I think he probably will stick by him. Yes, it's very hard to gainsay. 27% of the polls, leading 3 out of the last 5, and with a membership that's gone from 40,000 to 220,000. It's hard to turn around to the chairman and say, "That was a dreadful job you've just done. You better be gone." It's very hard to do, and to be perfectly frank, if people did want to remove Zia, having people on that side or outside the party saying sack Zia is not the way to do it.
No, agreed. I think particularly given if Reform do extremely well in the locals and they win Runcorn, I mean,
absolutely,
it kind of varies.
Winning Runcorn, I think, I don't believe the polls. Absolutely not the Ashcroft poll. I mean, let's think. Why would Lord Ashcroft, the current biggest donor of the Conservative Party and greatest supporter of Kemi Badenoch, produce a poll with the Tories on less than 10% and we're winning by 7% in a town like Runcorn, the 16th safest Labour seat? Could it be that if the Tories get 15% and Reform get 30%, the Tories can claim victory at 15% and end to the momentum of Reform at 30%?
I think that's difficult.
And I think that is what that poll is trying to do, to create this image that it's Reforms for the taking.
It could just be that is what the numbers on the ground are saying.
Well, the methodology was quite dicey.
It's easy to slightly push
small
polls.
Which ward did they ask questions in? They didn't ask people in the Tory ward, for example.
Right.
And they did ask very heavily in the Reform Labour switch ward.
But I would put for you, I don't think that's going to work for the Tories. And I think that actually... So this is what I think. I think it's kind of a win-win, really. I mean, unless Reform do extraordinarily badly. I mean, that's
which I don't think we're going to.
Which I don't think will happen, right? But what I think is, if Reform lose to Labour, I mean, the Tories will get like 10%, probably ish, 5 to 10% at worst, right?
More.
I think they'll get more, but I'm saying at the very, very worst, right? And so it's an easy thing then for Reform to say, well, we would have won without a Tory vote. If the Tory vote is a wasted vote.
There have been 3 polls suggesting Reform are going to win, and I think it's an 18 to 53. That isn't Snowdon, that's Mont Blanc.
Yeah,
it's a huge swing required. But we're going to work hard. We're going to make a huge effort. We are making a huge effort. People have been working and working on the constituency very hard since the unfortunate incident in Frodsham. But I'm going back to your original questions. Can Reform replace the Tories? Absolutely. We are an electoral threat to Labour, as I said. We're an existential threat to the Tories. Does that mean if the polls continue the way they are, or if we gain 3 or 4 points in the next 3 or 4 years, that puts us in the ridiculous situation where a party with 5 seats could end up as the absolute majority party in government? If you'd asked me that this time last year, I would have spluttered so hard this sheet of glass between us would have broken. But clearly, that's no longer as bats as it once might have sounded. When Zia, I think it was Zia, first said, straight after the election, we're going to make Nigel Farage Prime Minister, even I thought, well, that's a bit vainglorious, isn't it? Maybe it's not so mad. The idea that Farage either being in the head of a centre-right grouping in the in Parliament or an absolute majority is no longer bats. I would say, and it's almost inconceivable that I'm saying it and being serious and talking to serious political journalists and things who just turn around and say, is that I think 120 seats is our base at the next election.
I think that's probably true.
And yet, what? That's nuts.
Yeah.
That is absolutely barking.
But if you look at
it isn't barking, it's real.
But if you look at the fact that, I mean, if Labour even lose 5-6%, which actually that would be
devastating.
Well, and that's better than their polling at the moment, so they'd have to recover to get to that. But let's just say that they do. There's some sort of base to what the Labour Party can do, and then if you look at what the Conservative Party are doing, because I think that's huge. It's just, again, I just come back to
when you say huge, is this a sort of the inverse of huge?
It's sort of the inverse of huge. I mean, it's huge in the sense of like, here's the world's oldest and most successful political party. And with a sort of a sort of an ability to constantly change and shift and do. I mean, even if you look at during the Blair years, right? Yeah. I mean, there was some trouble, but actually you kind of felt like they're trying to work it out. They're trying to get there. Hague wasn't an insane choice by any means. In fact, actually, you kind of
he was unlucky.
He was unlucky. You felt bad for Hague in a sense.
There's never a bad time to win, but that was possibly a bad time to win.
Exactly. Whereas I think this is like, it's just completely different. As you say, I mean, your supposition that they're dead is sort of makes some sense.
I think what part of the problem they've got is, Kemi is tripping up left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
She launches an invisible campaign. She has a great policy event launch on the day that the government decide to take a machine gun to disable people, and therefore her entire policy platform is knocked off. Apart from the one thing about the net zero, and then when people looked at it a bit more closely, it isn't an end to net zero.
Yeah.
Apart from the one policy, which isn't what it says it is, the rest of it's been completely forgotten because of the disability benefits change.
Yeah.
And that's bad politics because they've known about that launch for a while.
I agree.
And it's just, why would you do that?
And then their response to the benefits stuff was, well, it doesn't go far enough, which is just a bit weak. Just a bit late.
But it's not just that. It's the fact that, what I mean by the bad politics, they are inflexible.
Yes, I'd agree
They
with
have
that.
the ability to change. Oh, well, we booked the room. So what?
Yeah.
You change because they're the government. And what they say actually matters.
Yeah.
What you say might matter in 4 years' time.
Yeah.
So frankly, the press are not going to give a fart about that. They're going to care about that.
Right.
And that shows bad politics. It shows inflexibility.
Yeah.
All the claims about her laziness, all her claims about her... I mean, I'm talking to somebody who worked on her campaign, and during the general election, she was doing various bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And they were saying, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. So tomorrow we start at 8, we do that. And then we go from this way. We can go to 3 countries possibly in one day, but maybe all 4. That'd be great. And the response back, nothing before 12.
Right.
Nothing before 12.
Yeah, that's poor.
Okay, is that Tuesday? No. Nothing before 12.
Yeah.
And that was sort of quite...
that rings true to everything I've heard. It's a similar thing I've heard.
This is what I believe. So you've got a party in this existential crisis. You've got a party that really doesn't know what it's for and hasn't known what it's for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And I think this is what people forget. It's not just forgotten what it's for. It's not really known what it's for a while. And it's got in the past, when Hague was trying to rebuild and all the rest of it, they didn't have a successful, popular party to their right.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
They had the luxury of 3 years of putting with their thumb where the sun don't shine, and pondering stuff and having big thoughts.
Yeah.
They don't have that luxury anymore. They can't just go and commission 4 think tanks, go away and come back in 4 years' time with a nicely pristine set of policies that attach to our history, our culture, but also are forward thinking and caring with a little fluffiness.
Right.
They don't have the time.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I think this is a big problem for the Conservatives, but it spills over into reform as well, this issue that I'm going to get to, which is, I think one of the things, and this is something I really want to explore on this channel, and it's really interesting, I want to get people on to talk about it, which is the idea of what is right-wing anymore is becoming more and more nebulous, as is what is left-wing. I mean, left-right is kind of weirdly broken down.
Thing.
It's a strange thing. I mean, just in the sense of, you've got Trump coming out with these 25% tariffs. I mean, it's like practically Stalinist, basically. I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot with that one, but you can respond to that if you want. But it is, if you like. There was a woman
in many cases, we've had those tariffs on American goods. The rest of the world has had those tariffs on American goods for many years. And
true, but I would argue that
it's everybody go, oh, he's putting these tariffs on. You've had those tariffs for decades.
I'd agree, but what I would say is, that...
But it seems to be the hypocrisy stinks.
Sure, I agree with that, but if you're looking at a sort of Reaganite, Thatcherite kind of idea of the world...
The sort of laissez-faire economics.
Laissez-faire. We should have less tariffs. We should have more free trade. All that.
But what I'm being amused, because it's Trump doing it, what I'm being amused by now is all the people I've known for years who've been against free trade say, no, free trade's really important because it's Trump.
Yes, absolutely.
So all the protectionists of my youth. And now sort of Milton Friedman and Hayek and all the rest of it's like, mate, you were supporting Corbyn.
Well, I found that actually on the Brexit debate. I found that a lot, actually. There's sort of like, have a Green councillor and he'll say something along the lines of, this is, we need to protect it with, growth is terrible.
Caroline Lucas was a Brexiteer, or it was a Eurosceptic before she went to Brussels.
Well, I can believe it, because actually on the left...
She was.
I can believe it. Because actually on the... You can easily make a left-wing case, the Mick Lynch case, which actually has always made sense to me. I've always understood it.
Bob Crow and Farage used to get on very well.
Yeah, I can believe it, because it is that sort of thing. But if you like, it's like, as someone who, myself, is more along the lines of a sort of a Reagan Thatcherite worldview.
Orange Booker, you.
Yeah, exactly.
You orange booker.
I am. I am indeed. A filthy
Listen.
orange booker. Actually, I'm probably more right wing now. in that sense. But it's so it's strange to me that that's gone. If you like, I mean, I could probably join the Conservative Party in 2010, but it's not the same party.
What you're seeing is, I think, if you're going to have a definition for right these days, I think the economic argument is up in the air.
I'd agree.
But I do think the cultural right is where there is a sort of a group that you can say are culturally right wing.
But I think even then it gets tricky, and you're seeing it, I think, with Farage Lowe. Like in a way, it's a slippery slope. Like someone like me. Okay, I'll put it to you this way. So I think there's.
I don't think it's a slippery slope. I think there's different positions. That doesn't mean if one's on one position, you slide down to another position.
Well, no, but what I'm saying, I'm not saying people.
But I think there are differing positions within.
I'm saying the overall culture, if you like, sort of goes and to where you've got these like bros on Twitter, and okay, fine, they're a small group, but who are saying like actually Hitler should have won the war and all this sort of stuff. If you haven't been on X for a while, check it out. It's becoming there's a lot of weirdness out there.
Well, no, it's actually, thinking about it, one of the Reform candidates was hauled up for saying something adjacent to that.
Right.
And when I actually read in depth what he'd said, he didn't say, but it could be, if you take one sentence out of this paragraph, it could be said to say that. So,
right. And I think there's a sort of common sense place on the right and culture wars stuff where you say, I don't know, like something like.
But I think
the men and women's sports. The
slogan that Farage coined when he decided to come back into it, family, community, country.
Yeah.
When I first heard it personally, I did take a tiny recoil, and then I stopped and thought, actually, no, I'm happy to go with that. I do think that has meaning outside Westminster.
I think it does too. For what it's worth.
And I think. And it was interesting. Do you remember I call it the concentric circles of care. I love my family and friends first, and then I can my hometown, my county, my country, my nation, and after that, I don't wish anybody any harm.
Right.
But I cannot. My heart is not big enough to love the whole world.
Well, I think you're right in the sense that no one is.
But that row between J.D. Vance and Rory Stewart was all about this, because Vance was prosecuting this as his idea, and Stuart was saying, well, you love your neighbour as yourself.
Yeah, J.D. Vance,
and that's. But can we define what neighbour is?
Yeah.
Is it somebody who lives in Mongolia, or is it somebody who lives next door?
Right.
So that we don't know. Now, there's been an assumption that it's everybody should be loved equally wherever they are in the world. But how? We are human.
Yeah.
And I think what Farage is trying to... But that's not economic, is it? Those three words. There's no thought.
There's no economics in that.
There's no thought of economics.
Absolutely,
It's about society.
Right.
It's about culture. And even during the referendum debate, I don't know if you recall, somebody jumped up and down when he said, I don't care if GDP drops by a percentage or two, or doesn't grow as fast as some of the...
that came out during the Brexit
and he said that, and then said, oh my God, Farage, we thought he was into business and trade and all the rest of it. And he says, but he was talking about GDP, gross GDP, not GDP per capita, sorry. Yeah. And gross GDP is increased by increased numbers of people.
Yeah.
And so he was prepared to take a hit on growth and gross GDP growth.
Yeah.
And there was a great storm at the time. Pointy fingers, you don't want growth. Well, no, he wants society.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, I'm going to close on something controversial. Here we go. So one of the things that could happen, I often think about the people who are talking about immigration, hugely focused on immigration, and the idea that, and I think during the EU referendum that was a big deal.
Yep.
Although I think the debate has moved on, and what's interesting is obviously since Brexit we've seen so much more immigration from other parts of the world.
Just take back control and throw open the doors. Well done, Boris.
Correct. Might that mean that, let's say, in 5 years' time, the right starts to become the Europhiles and the left are the ones that just go all in on Euroscepticism?
I don't know. I think right now the position that Farage has taken, for example, isn't at the bottom of your slippery slope.
Yeah.
In the way that Rupert seemed to be moving towards.
Yeah.
If we have another 4 years of over 750,000 net arriving, then who knows what the mood of the country will be like.
Right. Yeah.
And I think Labour really have to get a grip of that, or I think the mood in the country will be a lot angrier than it is now.
I'd agree with that.
On a subject like that.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And so what people say today and what people say in 3 years' time may be very different because the facts on the ground will have changed.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, obviously, the world's going to change so much in the next 5 years. I guess I'm sort of contentiously trying to go, could Nigel Farage lead a reform campaign?
Well, I don't think that's ever going to be likely to be happen. But
I think you're right.
But what is, I think, very interesting is most of my chums who are ardent files, the Europhiles, don't seem to notice what's happening on the continent electorally and politically. And the significant growth. They're still saying, we've got to join, we rejoin. Yeah. They're still outside Parliament Square waving their flags and all the rest of it every single bloody day. And I'm just thinking, talking to you 10 years ago or 5 years ago, you'd have reviled the sort of people who are getting elected in Europe now. The policies that are being produced and things...
But you are kind of getting to my argument, which is the right could be the Europhiles. In other words, if Europe goes in a more right-wing direction...
Well, in the 70s, the right were.
Precisely.
And the left weren't, because they saw it as a bosses' club. The left
Correct.
Were right.
The capitalists.
The left were right, by the way. And now you see significant... But purely in a technical sense, not in a moral, ethical, or other sense... I think that the parties, the patriotic parties that one sees growing up across Europe are a little bit like the Confederacy.
Okay.
Whereas the part of
interesting comparison.
PSE, well, that's what I mean, just on a technical sense.
Okay.
Whereas the PSE, the EPP, the ALDE, and the other European political groups are much more single entities.
Yeah.
Whereas the more patriotic parties are very different from each other. They are not a single unit. So in the north was the Union, and the south was lots of little states. And that's what I mean. It's the
right.
They were
no, I get you now. I get you.
That's what I mean. It's not the politics of it. It's the technical.
It's the technical. Yeah.
Aspect.
No, I'm with you.
And so whilst this is why I'm saying no to your question, is because the populist patriotic parties of Europe are very different internally from one another.
Of course.
Whereas the socialist parties of Europe are essentially the same thing.
I'd agree with that.
And so that's why it'll always be.
But I guess
it's more like countries are more likely to leave than the European Union becomes right wing.
Becomes more right. Okay. Well, on that note, thank you to my guest, Gawain Towler. You've been great. Thank you very much. And I know I'm going to get a lot of angry comments on this. But I want to say that neoliberal centrist dead is for everyone. I talk to people left, right, centre, and I will always do so. So thank you for joining me. And please, if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please do. And thank you, as always, to Bloomsbury Radio and the Bloomsbury Institute.